Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Fireside Chat. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Lecciadello.
First this week, former President Donald Trump is not letting go of his get-out-of-jail-free claim that presidents should be immune from prosecution, despite this week's scathing ruling from a three-judge appeals court panel that it was basically complete bunkum.
If a president does not have immunity, the opposing party during his or her term in office can extort and blackmail the president by saying, if you don't give us everything we want, we'll indict you for things you did while in office. Even if everything done was totally legal and appropriate, that would be the end of the presidency and our country as we know it, and is just one of the many traps there would be for a president without presidential immunity. Obama, Bush, and soon crooked Joe Biden would all be in prison. Protect presidential immunity. Make America great again.
Chaz, some have interpreted that last part as a threat from Trump. If you don't give me immunity, I'll put Obama, Bush, and Biden in jail. Well, maybe. But this is basically the argument that Trump's lawyers have been trying. They certainly did before this court back in January. And they're likely to make it again if there is a further appeal or if this ultimately is successful in its petition to go to the Supreme Court. One of the many problems with it is that presidents have never been considered immune. They are not above the law. We know that from the 1970s. That's why Richard Nixon was ultimately pardoned, because he was likely to be indicted for crimes committed during Watergate. If he wasn't facing the potential to go on trial, there would be no reason for President Ford to pardon Nixon. And of course, this argument that a president would be indicted even if everything done was totally legal and appropriate, and that it would end the presidency and it would end the country, as Trump suggests there, well, that's just silly, because it has definitely very limited legal merits, if any. But what it has done is it's slowed progress on the January 6th case. This is the federal case that looks like being sort of the biggest hurdle for Trump to overcome between now and the election. And, maybe that's been the point all along.
Well, that's definitely been the point all along. But to be fair to Trump's lawyers, the arguments that they're making are not that bad. That every president in the future will be indicted for not doing anything wrong. But the judges in the DC Court of Appeals, they took care of Trump's argument anyway by noting that even Trump acknowledges that this is the first time ever a former president has been federally indicted. So it's not like they've needed immunity so far. They also noted the absurdity of the president, who alone is vested with the constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, being the sole officer capable of defying those same laws with impunity. Another pretty good point that they made is that this whole case is about whether Trump is immune from performing official acts, okay? Trump's lawyers are not arguing that Trump can just walk down the street and slit someone's throat, even though Trump is arguing that.
Yeah, shoot him on Fifth Avenue, I think, technically.
Yes. These lawyers are saying that Trump should be immune for any official acts that he performs as president. But the judges didn't accept that Trump's actions around January 6 were official acts, because presidents have no constitutionally prescribed role in counting electoral votes. That's not his job. As a bit of an aside, when Trump petitioned the Supreme Court at the time about his election fraud claims back in December 2020, he explicitly said that he was doing it as a candidate, not in his official capacity. They put that in the filing. And finally, the judges noted that Trump's position would collapse our system of separated powers by placing the president beyond the reach of all three branches. Presidential immunity would mean that the Congress could not legislate the ex-president. The executive could not prosecute the ex-president. The judiciary could not review the ex-president. And they said they could not accept that the presidency places its former occupants above the law for all time thereafter. Fair enough. The judges also made an important decision though. Normally the next stage of appeal would be to the full DC Court of Appeals, because there was only three judges on the panel for this, right? Then to the Supreme Court after that. But this panel said they would only stop the trial judge from holding the trial while an appeal to the Supreme Court was happening. They said they would not stop the trial judge while an appeal to the full Court of Appeals was occurring. And that's important because that essentially forces Trump to skip a step and appeal straight to the Supreme Court, if he wants to waste time at least. And that's important because time is of the essence. According to Norm Eisen, who knows his way around the courtroom, there is still about 3 months of pre-trial work to go before the main trial can begin. So even if the Supreme Court refuses to hear the appeal, the actual January 6th trial ain't going to start until June and conclude around September. But if the Supreme Court does choose to hear the appeal, the trial would begin sometime in July and will conclude somewhere between the beginning and end of October, the week before the election. That's all if the Supreme Court doesn't waste any time whatsoever. So it really wouldn't take much to push this trial past the election, John.
Yes, although the Supreme Court is clearly aware of the political implications of these cases that it may or may not choose to hear. So you think that if they possibly can, they want to get it all out of the way and off their docket into somebody else's hands before the election.
That's true, but the bottom line is the Supreme Court, their job is to look after the law.
Yeah.
If they think the DC Court of Appeals is erred in some way, not that they agree with Trump, but if the Supreme Court thinks the DC Court of Appeals has set some precedent that they want to unset, they've got to hear the case. We're in October then. The trial judge, Chutkan, might say it's too late to hold this trial before the election. Yeah,
well, meanwhile, the United States Supreme Court has earlier today heard oral arguments in the so-called 14th Amendment case, where the state of Colorado disqualified former President Trump from their state ballot because they believe that he is not constitutionally qualified to serve as president after being involved in the January 6, 2021 attempt to stop Joe Biden being recognised as the winner of the last election. Now, they did stay that, so Trump is on the ballots, which are going out, so he will be on the primary ballots. But there are several bits of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that have come under a lot of scrutiny by legal scholars and also in this hearing overnight. The 14th Amendment, Section 3 says in part, no person shall hold any office under the United States who, having previously taken an oath as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion. Also, it says that Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Now, Trump's lawyers have been picking through all of that before the court. Is a president even considered an officer? If the authors of that particular article of the Constitution meant it to apply to the president, why wouldn't they explicitly say so? They single out senators and representatives and electors of the president, but not the president. So it could be that because, unlike, say, Barack Obama, who had previously been sworn in as a senator before he became president, therefore considered an officer, the 14th Amendment might not apply to Trump because he never held elected office before the presidency, but Barack Obama, if he goes ahead and becomes an insurgent or something, that could become an insurrectionist, and that could become a problem for Barack Obama. One of the other issues is whether the oath that the president takes, in which they swear to affirm that they will preserve, protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, amounts to supporting the Constitution as stated in Article 3, because it is not the identical language. They're raising questions about that. Section 5 also adds that the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. And that last section is another area of legal debate before the Supreme Court. Does Congress need to pass a law to disqualify somebody, or can states go it alone, as Colorado has, effectively creating a precedent for other states? Well, several justices, including Liberal Elena Kagan, thought that surely, if anything, we're talking about a national election, this is a national issue, not for a state to just go off half-cocked on all of this. And hearing the oral arguments this morning, the justices all seemed concerned about the political implications, including the idea that if it is left to Congress to decide Trump's eligibility after, hypothetically, he's re-elected in November, well, that could create a constitutional crisis. Now, there are so many other questions around this. Their final opinion, though, it's likely to take some weeks. It seems very little doubt that this is going to be thrown out. It could even be a unanimous verdict against Colorado by all 9 justices, which is quite rare. So this looks like it's going to be a big win for Donald Trump. But there's still a question as to, of all the little holes they were picking in the Colorado case, they're all coming at it from different directions. we've got to get 5 of them to say this is the reason, and it has to be based on law, not just concerns about we may destroy America if we kick Donald Trump off the ballot.
Well, actually, they don't need to agree on the reason. If they got 5 people saying no, that's all that matters. Or rather, yes, he's qualified. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
I should say that that I've read a lot of legal opinions about this, and there are a lot of people out there who think that Trump should be disqualified. But those same people don't think Trump will be disqualified.
Yes.
I haven't read anyone who says that they expect the Supreme Court to find him disqualified, even if they think the law is clear that he should be disqualified, just because it's so obvious what the political implications of this are, and they know the Supreme Court aren't going to want to go down in history as the people who disqualified Trump. The question is going to be, what is the issue that as you say, what's the legal reason behind it, and what precedents do that set? I just wonder, this is a bit of a wild one here for you, John. Have the Democrats missed a trick maybe, in that everyone is assuming the Supreme Court is going to allow him to be on the ballot? If the Democrats had, say, 2 months ago, offered to pass a bill to indemnify, to essentially exempt him from the 14th Amendment, like it says in the Constitution, you can,
Yes, get the two-thirds
vote. I wonder what they could have gotten with that vote. Like, if they'd said, okay, we'll pass that bill with you.
It's a part of a Ukraine aid bill.
Throw in Ukraine funding. Throw in pro-choice legislation.
You should be Speaker of the House. That's
Maybe it wouldn't have worked. But given that no one at any point in time has thought he actually would get thrown off the ballot by the Supreme Court. Like, want to take a freebie.
Yeah, there was an interesting slippery slope kind of argument that Chief Justice John Roberts was making where...
Maybe it's too cynical.
Yeah, maybe it is. Roberts was interesting because he's seen as a Chief Justice the one who's the most anxious to not have the court be seen as entirely political and to try and pull back where possible from the political process and allow voters to determine political outcomes. It hasn't always worked out that way. And he was putting forward a sort of slippery slope argument. If we let Colorado kick Trump off, then who's to say that, we're not going to have Florida kick Biden off or whatever and have the whole thing become ridiculous and destroy democracy in the process. The other big tell in all of this, in over 2 hours of questions from the 9 justices, there was basically no mention at all asking Colorado, can you prove that he engaged in insurrection or rebellion? And that would be key to justifying a decision in favour of Colorado. So that they didn't even go there, but they picked all these other different holes in it that supported Trump's argument that he should be on. That was the big tell. But as we discussed on Planet America earlier this week, it does now look as though the first Trump case to go to trial will be the one brought by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. This is the one that is trying to turn a business accounting fraud misdemeanor case into a criminal case because Bragg alleges that when Trump cooked the books to pay hush money to adult performer Stormy Daniels all those years ago, he was committing election fraud as well to try and win the 2016 election. That is a fascinating case which people are generally saying Trump will get off the hook on that one as well. Others have convinced themselves, actually, it's pretty tight. So we'll just see how that plays out in the courts. Meanwhile, the federal case against Donald Trump for mishandling official documents remains very much on the back burner in a Florida court. Chances are that is not going to go to trial before November. The separate Special Counsel investigation into Joe Biden's handling of documents after he left the vice presidency in 2017, though, has concluded earlier today that no criminal charges are warranted against Joe Biden. Now, the Special Counsel does point out that Biden did take some documents home and they were stored in an insecure way. There was a cardboard box full of documents in his garage. There was a filing cabinet under his TV set. Biden was also found to have shared some of the classified material therein, particularly relating to the 2009 Afghanistan troop surge when he was VP, that he showed that to the ghostwriter of his memoirs. But importantly, unlike Donald Trump, Joe Biden did not hide the documents when the FBI came looking, and he did not repeatedly lie about what he had in his possession. But, all that being good news for Joe Biden, there was a real sting in the tail. The Special Counsel report said that Joe Biden came across to investigators as, quote, a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Well, that description surely riled the president. It prompted him to call a prime-time White House address to the nation earlier today, where he angrily refuted claims about his poor memory, particularly the suggestion that he couldn't even remember when his son Beau died.
I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business.
Yeah, he wasn't happy about that.
Not at all.
Look, I haven't read this report yet. It is very long. But I expect the question that most Trump supporters will be asking right now is, why does Trump get charged for mishandling classified documents, but Joe Biden gets off scot-free? You've already noted one element of the reason why, John, but I'd like to quote the extremely conservative Daily Wire, because they are right. One key difference between the cases was that Biden's team quickly cooperated with federal investigators, like you said before, John, while Trump is accused of obstructing the federal criminal investigation. Now, this is the important bit. The only charges Trump was hit with in the investigation stem from the documents that were recovered after he was served with a subpoena. He was not charged with any crimes for documents that he turned back over to the US government when he was requested to do so. So that is a key difference. That they were actually, when they were in the same position, where they were both caught with documents, Trump wasn't charged with anything, just like Biden wasn't charged with anything. Trump was only charged when he went past where Biden was. So they were treated the same way. Just Trump pushed it further. So that's your answer. It's pretty straightforward, but expect Trump to try to obscure that fact as much as possible from now on.
Yeah, and those elderly man with a poor memory comments have already triggered another round of Democratic Party bedwetting today. One House member quoted anonymously today saying that it is a nightmare that weakens Joe Biden electorally. I think this has the potential to be very damaging to Joe Biden, Chaz, because it is one thing for selective clips of Joe Biden gaffes and pauses and memory fades to be cobbled together and put out there on conservative media platforms. But that's preaching to the choir. That's to people who already think that Joe Biden shouldn't be president of the United States. When a special counsel says that the president of the United States comes across as well-intentioned elderly with a poor memory, Americans do not want a president whose memory, i.e. their mental competence, has been questioned by somebody with the esteem typically associated with a special counsel.
I got to say, I disagree. I reckon that Americans don't know who this guy is, and the fact that this guy said he's old, he's got a poor memory. Everyone knows he's old. Everyone thinks he has a poor memory. There are people who think he's on drugs and he's comatose. Like you said that this is like an official judgment as opposed to some clip out of context. I actually think clips are more powerful when you see it with your own eyes. And the fact that they're out of context, yeah, I knock that all the time, that they're out of context, but they still work. And if there's one of them every single day, literally just this week we saw Biden confuse 2 foreign leaders with dead people. Like if you just see one of them every single day, you just get I think that has a huge impact. And I think that I think it's baked in already. I really do. And I think every day that we see another clip, it gets baked in more. And the fact that some guy who everyone's going to forget about in a week's time said that he had a poor memory, I don't think he's going to stick as much as the avalanche of clips. And also, when you see Biden speak, he's just getting slower and slower. I mean, look, the bottom line is that he's going through with it no matter what happens. Yep. Like he had to make a decision.
I suspect that the attack ads will have both. They will have the Biden senior moments, and they will have the quote from the special counsel, and that will add credibility and gravitas to the claim. But we'll wait and see if it sticks, if it has any difference, or whether people are already, as you suggest, baked in their opinions. People know whether they like this guy or not.
I think what you just said is correct. It's not like the quote's going to disappear. But just, the bottom line is if Biden thinks that this is the thing that's going to make people think he's too old, he's delusional.
You said it. After months of bipartisan negotiations, the US Senate this week failed to advance a bill providing aid for Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan, as well as reforming the immigration system and improving border security. They needed 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. In the end, the bill got just 49. 4 Republicans voted in favour, the lead negotiator, James Langford of Oklahoma, and then the axis of reasonable, Susan Collins of Maine, Mitt Romney of Utah, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Republican Minority Leader Mitch McConnell ultimately was a no vote, not because he was against it, but because he knew that it was doomed. In fact, according to the lead Democrat negotiator, Senator Chris Murphy, McConnell didn't just bless this deal, he wrote the deal, saying that McConnell's staff were in the room every day. Should note as well, Chaz, that for various reasons, 4 Democrats and independent Bernie Sanders of Vermont voted no as well, safe in the knowledge that this thing was toast. But moments before that final vote, which he knew was about to be lost, Republican Senator James Langford made this quite stirring speech, brandishing the pen that he was given when he was sworn into the Senate in 2015. He basically chided his Republican Party colleagues for getting nothing done.
There's no reason for me to have this pen if we're just going to do press conferences. I can do press conferences from anywhere, but we can only make law from this room. And to do that, you need one of these pens. There's 100 of them in this room, and 60 of us have to agree to solve a problem.
It was a great speech, but no dice, and now President Biden has potentially a new line of attack against the Republican Party, saying that in Congress they are doing nothing and they're just taking their cues from Donald Trump.
So Republicans have to decide, who do they serve? Donald Trump or the American people? Are they here to solve problems or just weaponize those problems for political purposes? I know my answer. I serve the American people. I'm here to solve problems. Just months ago that Republicans were asking for this exact bill to deal with the border, to provide support for Ukraine and Israel. And now it's here.
That's now Biden's main line of attack, to try to neutralise what until now has been his most damaging issue, handling immigration. He was 35 points down in the NBC News poll the other day on that, and that's fine. But one version of that argument really gives me the heebie-jeebies, John. The White House sent out a memo titled, "Will the House GOP vote with the Border Patrol to secure the border or for more fentanyl and Donald Trump?" Now, while they're correct that the Border Patrol endorsed the bill, which is an important point to note, because the Border Patrol don't like Joe Biden much, but they did like the bill, to say that not passing the bill will lead to more fentanyl, that is so cynical and dodgy, because the White House have been rightfully arguing for years that the fentanyl crisis has got nothing to do with illegal immigration. 88% of arrested fentanyl smugglers in 2022 were American citizens. Most of the other smugglers were legally permitted to cross the border. I got those stats from the White House, I might add. Biden's been arguing this for ages, and now the White House is using the exact same arguments that they've been debunking. It is so cheap. Mind you, Trump makes it pretty easy for Biden to make these kinds of arguments, because he said this last week.
I noticed a lot of the senators are trying to say respectfully they're blaming it on me. I said, that's okay, please blame it on me, please.
And Biden tweeted that clip out yesterday with the caption, "You got it." He's more than happy to blame Trump. And you can tell Trump regrets going down that road, because now he is not blaming himself anymore. He is very much blaming James Langford. James Langford is the fall guy. In fact, Trump's going so far as to deny he ever even endorsed James Langford.
Well, just to correct the record, I did not endorse Senator Langford. I didn't do it. He ran, and I did not endorse him.
He's unpersoning Langford, John. The only problem is we got the receipts. There's the endorsement, and there's Trump calling Langford strong on the border. Now, another argument you've been hearing a lot the last few days is that Biden can just say, close the border, and the border will be closed. No new bill is necessary. Well, number one, Trump, when he was president, said something very different when he was calling for the Democrats to pass new laws to fix asylum. But anyway, on top of that, the spiritual leader of the Conservatives in the House, Chip Roy, disagrees.
No, we're not going to just pass the buck and say that, oh, any president can walk in and secure the border. I saw former President Trump make that allegation earlier today on one of his social media posts. All the president has to do is declare the border is closed and it's closed. Well, with all due respect, that didn't happen in 2017, 18, 19, and 20. There were millions of people who came into the United States during those 4 years.
And he's right, John. I'm going to save you the trouble of me raving on about immigration for the next hour. I did that in Pep, by the way. If you want to hear about immigration, right there. Yeah. But despite, I'll give you one stat. Despite the 8 million encounters under Biden, the actual numbers, 2.3 million people released into the country under Biden, 1.1 million people released under Trump. Less under Trump, but still plenty. Them's the facts.
Yeah. Still on Capitol Hill, and House Speaker Mike Johnson may have helped to scuttle the border foreign aid bill, but he didn't have a great week, nonetheless, committing the cardinal sin of putting a vote over the impeachment of Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas to the floor, thinking that he had the numbers, but then this happened.
On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 216. The resolution is not adopted.
Okay, Chad.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Utah...
This is really something, because you don't bring this to the floor unless you have the votes. This has echoes of the speaker vote when McCarthy was going for 15 different times, and when we ended up with Speaker Mike Johnson. How do you do the count? You bring it to a vote to lose by one vote.
Good question, Fox News' Brett Baer. Good question. The answer... Mike Johnson lost 3 Republican votes and Steve Scalise was absent. He's still receiving treatment for his cancer. And then came a surprise. The sudden appearance in the chamber of an extra Democrat, Representative Al Green. He's recently had surgery. He was literally wearing hospital scrubs and no socks. and he turned up and he voted against the bill. Then Mike Johnson's deputy, Blake Moore, he switched for procedural reasons. A spokesperson for Johnson says that they will bring this impeachment bill of Mayorkas back to the floor as soon as they have the votes, and that could be Monday of next week, or it could be absolutely never. Many Republicans maintain that Mayorkas has broken the law and should be impeached because he's failed to secure the border, but this also raises a lot of doubts, not just about the legality of the Mayorkas impeachment, but also whether Republicans will ever have the numbers to vote to impeach President Biden, which is something they're still trying to do. And it does not work, doesn't seem to be working out too well for them.
No, apparently they're still 20 votes away from impeaching Biden, and it's getting further away all the time. But I do think they'll have the numbers to take care of Mayorkas. Steve Scalise comes back next week from his cancer therapy. That will give them the numbers. But it just highlights that they didn't have to hold that vote now. They could have waited a week. They really hashed this up. For example, this is from the theoretical impeachment manager, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's kind of pathetic.
Well, we can basically look at this as a game, unfortunately, and their strategy. And they hid one of their members waiting to the last minute, watching to see our votes, trying to throw us off on the numbers that we had versus the numbers they had. So, yeah, that was a strategy at play tonight.
Don't blame them. It's not their job to tell you.
How dare they have the votes?
It's just so sad. It's such a mess that even the Republicans started trolling each other. This is what George Santos tweeted when the vote was 215 to 215. Miss me yet? The man can troll. And this is what Ryan Zinke told Axios. I knew that we'd have the ability to block the Democrat agenda, but we've exceeded my wildest expectations on blocking, because we not only block the Democrat agenda, we block the Republican agenda.
Zing.
But I don't want the chaos to distract from the fact that this is a really dubious impeachment. Like, the laws that Mayorkas supposedly broke are impossible to satisfy. They're talking about the fact that you're supposed to keep these illegal immigrants in detention. There are only 34,000 spots for millions of illegal immigrants. It's just impossible. Trump did the same thing. Obama did the same thing. This has happened forever. So why is Mayorkas being impeached? Mayorkas is just following Biden's policies.
Yeah.
He said the border's secure. Well, relatively speaking, it's a subjective thing. That's not lying.
Yeah.
Anyway, Republican no-vote Tom McClintock said this when Marjorie Taylor Greene told him to grow some courage and read the room. He said, well, instead of reading the room, I'd suggest maybe she read the Constitution. She took an oath to support and defend. The Constitution very clearly lays out the grounds for impeachment. This dumbs down those grounds dramatically and would set a precedent that could be turned against the Conservatives the moment the Democrats take control of Congress. Sadly, I think we're already on that path of escalation, John, and we are not getting off anytime soon. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but good on McClintock for trying to resist.
Yeah, for sure. With the US presidential primaries all but over and both Donald Trump and Joe Biden barely campaigning beyond the occasional set-piece speech or rally at the moment, it's fair to ask whether old-style retail presidential politics is now dead. Other days when a little-known candidate like Jimmy Carter could ride a bike across the state of Iowa and win enough votes to send him on his way to the White House, gone for good. Well, there's a few people better to ask than our guest on the Fireside Chat this week, Eric Woolson. He's run Iowa caucus campaigns for candidates including George W. Bush and Mike Huckabee. Eric, welcome to the Fireside Chat.
Thanks for having me.
Great to see you again. Now, what is your view on this sort of is retail politics dead thing? Because in this last cycle, you were running the campaign for North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who did one of those kind of retail campaigns. Donald Trump barely campaigned, did a few rallies, and he won by a mile. So do we declare old-style retail politics in Iowa and elsewhere dead and buried?
I don't think we do, and one reason was we thought I thought at least in 2000 that George W. Bush had killed old-style retail politics. When I was his communications director, and he would do 3 events a day. That was it, morning, noon, evening, and usually we had 500 people there. And I remember declaring this is the death of retail caucus campaigning, because I'd been around the first 20 years before that. I'd been a journalist, and Gary Hart would be somewhere with 6 people or 9 people. And in fact, in 2008, we kind of went back to that Governor Huckabee, and I would say, oh, these 6 people here, this is wonderful. And he didn't necessarily think that would be wonderful because he had seen Bush have 500 people. And that was the same year, too, that Barack Obama was running, and he was filling basketball arenas in Iowa, too. So all of a sudden, it was like, okay, it wasn't dead in 2000, it wasn't dead in 2008. Trump, obviously, the exception to the rule, but 4 years from now, we could be right back where we were in the 70s and 80s.
What's Nikki Haley doing still in the race?
One of the things that both she and DeSantis really behind the scenes early on was that whoever was the last candidate standing would be first in line in 2028. And I don't know that that's necessarily true here because of the way Donald Trump operates. In the past, it was like, okay, it was Bob Dole's turn. He lost in '88, and so it was his turn in '92 or '96, I think it was, 92 and '96. And so it was always sort of with candidates in the old days, it used to be this was your turn. And I think now if you're the last person standing against Donald Trump, his supporters are going to hate your guts, for starters. I remember somebody once said, a friend of mine was lamenting that her employees hated her, and somebody said to her, "No, they don't hate you; they just hate your guts." and so that's a danger that Nikki Haley faces, is that Trump's people hate her guts, and so the question of her staying in is really one of. Perhaps she thinks there's still an opportunity, but I think that what she's doing is continuing to build a base in hopes that the Trump people don't control the party in 2028.
On Nikki Haley, this week she was confronted with this discomforting image of her losing 63-31 to none of these candidates.
Yes.
Obviously, they were Trump supporters. She said, or her people said, that there was no point competing in the caucus because it was rigged for Trump. So they just wrote off Nevada completely. Do you, as a campaign pro, do you agree with that tactic, or do you think there was a stuff up from her people?
You know, I thought, I have so much history, I guess, going back to the mid-'70s, that I remember Jimmy Carter, we talked about Jimmy Carter winning the 76 caucuses. He actually finished behind uncommitted. There's a big difference between finishing behind uncommitted and finishing behind none of the above. So I think it was an embarrassment for Haley. I wouldn't have wanted to have been out there. I've had to explain a lot of things in the past that my candidates have done and haven't done, and that's one of the things I wouldn't want to have been out there saying, oh gosh, well, the great thing about this is, because it'd be difficult to find many great things to say about that.
With the legal questions swirling around Trump, it looks like the Supreme Court is probably going to say 14th Amendment case, forget about that. He's not disqualified from the ballot. Also looks as though he's not going to be found to be immune. Yeah. So we're going to have at least the January 6th federal case likely to proceed mid-year, possibly come to maybe if it does. But we could still, on the current timeline, we could see a scenario where Trump is criminally convicted before he is formally nominated by the Republican Party. As somebody who has worked in Republican presidential politics a long time, do you think there is a plan B? Is that part of the reason Nikki Haley is staying in this long? Because you can say, hey, I got delegates, and I guess I'm next, not in 2028,
right?
But in July and August.
Yeah, you know, there may be thinking that goes into that. I think those trials are going to be dragged out. I think it's going to be after the election, frankly, before anything gets decided. And so, you know, there's always that contingency. As a matter of fact, when I manage a campaign, I always have to see a path forward. And so, you know, people will say, well, your candidate's at 2% in the polls, what's your path forward? And I'd say, well, if the other 15 candidates are on the same plane that goes down over the ocean, you know, my guy's in pretty good shape. So there's always, you have to see this path forward. And that could be part of the Haley campaign's thinking, is that what happens if he is convicted? There we are. But I would be surprised, frankly, if there's a conviction before the election.
We saw just this week the head of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel, walk the plank. One of the things that she's been held responsible for is the RNC raised $87 million this year to the DNC's $119 million. Now, some might say that's because Trump raises all the money. He's like a sponge for donations to the Republican Party. Now, he's spent so much money on legal fees already. Like he's actually spent more money this year than he raised, him and all the super PACs, right? And the RNC isn't raising much money. Is it possible that we could have a presidential election for the first time in a long time where money is a genuine issue, that one side does not have enough money to compete properly? Is that possible or not?
I wouldn't rule that out. I could say that could be a possibility. You know, one of the things that DeSantis went through in spending all the money, and good God, I don't know how you could run a worse campaign, spend more money and run a worse campaign than he did. But all his high-dollar donors had maxed out, and so couldn't come up with that. One of the strengths that Trump has, obviously, is that he just has this huge base of small-dollar donors, and so $5 here, $10 here, $20 there. They're not going to max out on that, but they are, you know, maybe the lifeline that keeps them going. But again, to your point, it could very well be a case where it's a question of being competitive, and the money is the mother's milk of politics, as we all know, and it could be a case where the Republicans aren't competitive in the presidential level because of all those issues.
Just to take a sharp turn for a second, we saw this week Joe Biden refused to take the Super Bowl interview, which is traditionally a great spot. Very high ratings directly before the Super Bowl. It's only goes for 3 or 4 minutes. Softball interview, why would you turn it down? Now, his critics say, oh, it's because he's old. He can't do it. Joe Biden's people are saying it's because it actually annoys people. The football fans don't like the presidential interview beforehand. It's not that much of a benefit. What's the point? Do you buy their argument or not?
I do buy their argument. It's like when people want to see the game, they want to see the game. They don't. If I wanted to tune in to watch politics, I'd wait for a presidential debate, for instance. So I mean, I think they do. I think they do make a good argument, and even if you took the critics' side of the argument. What I hear from the critics all the time is, oh, whatever drug they're giving Joe Biden, he's able to function for 2 hours a day. So I would think that the people that are supposedly drugging Joe Biden would know, oh, we've got to drug him an hour before the Super Bowl interview so that he's up and running until the interview's over, and then we can put him back to bed as soon as it's over. But it makes complete sense to me that it's like, I tune into the game to see the game. I don't tune into the game to see Joe Biden talking about politics.
Eric, we've seen earlier today the Special Counsel looking into Joe Biden's mishandling of official documents. Say, look, we're not going to recommend a prosecution here. It was willfully done, but he fessed up to it. But the sting in the tail was that Joe Biden is an elderly man with a poor memory. Mm-hmm. Now, Biden's been trying to run the sort of Ronald Reagan 84 playbook of joking about his age. Yeah. Is that going to work, or is Joe Biden too old to joke about how old he is?
Yeah. I don't think it works for him in part because of his delivery. Reagan was an actor who was very, very gifted at, oh, here they go again, and oh, I'm not going to criticize my opponent because of his youth and inexperience. Joe Biden doesn't really function that way. There are guys. I've worked with candidates and governors, elected officials who some of them can joke, some of them can't tell a joke. I had a boss that we had the 1% rule where he had. My sense of humor and his were very different. So I would tell him about every 10th joke that came to my mind, and he would laugh at every 10th joke that I told him. And so I sort of knew better. I would go, okay. And in fact, my wife always tells me when I go out the door to do an interview or something, she always says, remember, you're not as funny as you think you are. and so I know to kind of pause on that. But Joe Biden's a substantially different person than Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan could do those things and get away with them. But a lot of people can't, and I think Biden is one of those who simply can't.
As a campaign pro, we're confronted with, for the first time in 100 years, an incumbent running against an incumbent. Mm-hmm. What difference does that make to the election campaign?
That's a great point. That's a great question, because a lot of people, and of course, even removing the belief that a lot of Republicans have that Trump still is the incumbent and that he did win the election. And if they would take that next step, if he won the election, he can't be running again because he would be running for his third term. But obviously you've got two very experienced political people. And I think, again, it goes back to that known commodity. Trump is a known commodity. And people are either going to vote for him or vote against him. But I think one of the things he's already doing in his playbook is he's now talking about how Indiana may be a rigged election in the GOP primary. And Indiana is one of the rock-ribbed Republican states. And so he's already, I think, setting up this argument that look, if I lose anywhere, it's rigged. And if I win, it's fine. There was no hanky-panky. But if I lose, it was rigged. And so I think he runs as an incumbent, and he runs really very much the same playbook that he ran. The irony, I think, now is Trump being kind of a chaos guy. I mean, when he came in, everybody was worried about how much turmoil he was going to cause. With the issues we've seen with the border, with inflation, with the Middle East, Trump really is saying, look, I'm stability. I'm the guy that can bring us back to where we used to be. And Biden's the guy that, gas prices are too high and all of this stuff. So it's ironic that he now has this opportunity to run as Mr. Stability, and having had that background as an incumbent really helps to do that.
Well, Eric Woolson, obviously we could keep talking until this fake fire burns down, but we are out of time. So thank you so much for being with us on the Fireside Chat.
Thank you. It's a delight.
Well, that is it for another Fireside Chat. We will see you back for Planet America on Wednesday night. It's at a slightly later time slot for the next couple of weeks, more like 9:50 than 9:30 because of a longer lead-in show. But if that's getting too late for you, you can watch any time after 7 p.m. on ABC iView and YouTube.
And do not forget, you can find the Pet Podcast and all the usual pod places right there. We'll see you back here next week on ABC News.
Bye-bye.